Hello, BookTube. It's time for another shelf tour. This is shelf tour 10 and poetry shelf number 11. Now, I'll start out with something interesting. It's one of my connection ones. What does a seafaring poetic captain, Field Marshal Allenby, the Belgian philosopher essayist Maeterlinck, and T.E. Lawrence have in common? Now, I hope that got your attention. It's this. Doesn't look like much, does it? It's a little book of poetry. It's called Sea Mist and Other Poems by T.J.C. Barrett. And T.J.C. Barrett was the captain and poet of the RMS Amazonia. And on Christmas Day, 1935, he presented this copy, signed with a long description, or a long, in French, quotation from Maeterlinck. And he ascribed it to Field Marshal Viscount Allenby. And again, that's Christmas Day, 1935. Allenby was returning from Argentina, I think it was, where he went hunting for a few months before, for his health, apparently. But then in May 14th, 1936, he died of a brain aneurysm. But during the First World War, he fought in France, but then he became the leader of the English Army, the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, I think it was called. And he commanded Thomas Edward Lawrence, T.E. Lawrence. And they marched together in October of 1918 into Damascus from a little book. And I need to verify all this, but I don't. There's nothing to for me to believe that it's not real. However, it would be nice to see something in a letter or diary of Allenby, of him saying, "Oh, Captain gave me a signed copy of his poetry book. We had dinner at his table for Christmas dinner," or something like that. You really need that to really prove it. But it's like somebody's gone to a lot of trouble, or to make a joke if it is. But it sort of fits. I haven't looked anything up recently, but when I did, I couldn't find anything, this book at all on the internet, period. I did find out that, yes, this Barrett was the captain of the, it's got RMS and then A, the way he's written it is ALMANZONA. I think it's the RMS. Now I've confused myself. Amazonia. But it says, with compliments, good wishes. I did find out the translation of the French from Maeterlinck. It's something to do with nature and preserving nature, I believe. So there might have been a bit of a dig there towards Allenby, where he was just returning from a hunting expedition, possibly in the Amazon, but from Argentina. Or at least that's where he went initially, to Argentina. I think he traveled a little bit. But no, there you go. And I normally would have made a whole video of this, but there really is, well, I could have, but I would have to do a little more research on it. But you get the short version here. And sorry, I need to reach over to grab some here. Here is Songs and Poems, Old and New, by William Sharp, and then it says Fiona MacLeod in brackets. So I'm not sure. I've never looked it up to see if that's a pseudonym she had. But it's Elliot Stock, 1909. I remember some interesting poems in here. It's got Ex Libris book plate by Maria Sargent, and I love it that somebody's stamped on it "withdrawn" when they gave it away. That's just lovely. It's nice. It's cloth and cream colored buckram that's a bit tarnished and darkened, but still nice. The Magic Garden, Octavia Gregory. Now, most of this might be a letdown to you after the first book, but I hope you're sticking with me. The Magic Garden by Octavia Gregory, Andrew Elliott, Edinburgh, 1920. So again, it's a small publication. It's quite beautiful. It's gold inlay. Let's get the glare off of it, and gold on the spine. Oh no, it is, yeah, but it's not printed all that well. Yeah, it's, again, nothing hugely memorable about the poetry, but it's interesting. This one I like. I just love it for partially the name. It's Tales of the Mermaid Inn, Alfred Noyes. And I believe the Mermaid Inn is in Rye, I think. A little town or village of Rye. It's where E.C. Benton lived, who wrote, I think it's E.C. Benton, that wrote the Map and Lucia stories, but he lived in a house that Henry James had. But the Map and Lucia stories were based on that house. Oh, I forget the name of the house, but anyway. But no, these I do really like Alfred Noyes' poetry. This is William Blackwood and Sons. 1924, and it's dedicated to Edmund Goss. But yeah, I do like his poetry, and so much so I've got a collected poems in one volume, second edition, Alfred Noyes. It's really heavy. It's this coated paper. It's not hugely long. It's 400, but it's a weight of like two books at least. It's John Murray, published. First in 1950, reprinted in 1966. Not much to see there. It's got the jacket, but it's nice blue cloth. It's in quite good shape. Again, I do like his story. Most may know, if they don't recognize, or you recognize the name but you're not quite sure, it's the Highwaymen. So you might that might trigger your memory. Here we go. Here is The Hill of the Vision by James Stephens. Munsell and Company, 1912. It's a writer. There's a few other books there. There's a book played in here. It's quite nice, but I forget what that's from. It's from a library. It's a specific library. But yeah, I remember liking some of the poetry. Sorry, I just reach over again. Collected poems of St. John Adcock. It's a Howder and Stoughton. Oh, I thought I said 2 volumes there for one, but it wasn't. Second edition. Howder and Stoughton, 1930. And there's some interesting poems in there again. It's a bit of a shame that I can't read you a sample of each. Well, I could, but we would be here till I'd be old and gray. Well, old and grayer, I suppose, if we did. Here we go. It's a Faber Book of 20th Century Women's Poetry, edited by Fleur Adcock. It's paperback. I kind of like these. I like the design of these Faber paperbacks. I don't have too many of them, but I do like hardcovers better. But something like this was quite interesting. It's just, yeah, it's 1987 originally, and reprinted the fourth printing in 1989, and it just goes through exactly what it says: 20th century women writers, women poets, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. Collected poems of Stephen Spender. Many may know him for his novels and journals, and he was also I was going to say friend of Orwell. Well, I think there was a bunch of them that were sort of kind of close. Could have been Anthony Pohl and Spender. I sort of forget now. Anyway, Faber and Faber, 1955, and this is Collected Poems 28 to 53, and it's got a previous owner's name in it, Jasper Elgood, Oxford, February 1975. So I wonder where Jasper is now. Probably was an undergraduate there, or possibly a professor. And yeah, nice red cloth. And Collected Poems of Walter Delamere. It's a bit rough. It's torn a bit there, and I need, again, as I say over and over, a few dust jacket protectors. This is with decorations by Berthold Wolp, Faber and Faber. This edition first published 1942. 42? But it's not a 1942 printing. Ninth impression. 1949. Because, yeah, it didn't have the look of wartime paper. It's not the greatest, but no, I've really liked it. You see, I got a bookmark in it where I've left off reading through. Collected Poems of James Alroy Flecker, Martin Secker. Number 5 John Street, Adelphi. First published 1916. This is 1932. It says here the frontispiece to this volume is from a photograph taken by a photograph of the author taken in Beirut in 1912. And yeah, a lot of poetry in there. Sorry, reaching back across. Oh, a minute. I think some of these are going to go flying. There we go. This is kind of interesting. Picked this up. It doesn't look like much, but it's a little rough. Stapled little pamphlet in honor of those who fly. A book of poems by aircraftman William Hicks. It was 1 shilling. It was published by Horn and Son Whitby Gazette. The Whitby Gazette. And there's like literally there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 poems in here. There's no date on it, but it is World War II. But yeah, so I think I actually got this in another book. It was stuck in a book, so that was more interesting than the book I actually bought. Here's a rough one in rough shape. The spine is starting to detach itself. It's The Village Wives' Lament by Maurice Hewlett. Martin Secker, 1918. And it's got a paper label for the spine. Pages are like there's a little catalog that's in there that's really, you can't see that, can you? It's darker and torn up a bit than the normal paper. I remember this being quite interesting, but a bit strange as well. Here's another paper one, from Moors and Windy Hills by V.A. Phillips. And it's got a dust jacket of sorts over a plain stapled cover. And it's Cambridge W. Heffer and Sons. 1925. Dedicated to my three friends KP, AAP, and CRA. Over they are. As you know, probably as you've seen from this, I generally buy hardcovers, but when there's something like this and the other one, that's fine. I sort of, unless it's something that was obviously original paperback, and I can't get it anywhere else. And this is Sowen, actually. It's a nice little item. Here's two books of a poet that I extremely like, and I think this is the only two books that he's written, and one of them, I think I got the only copy that was existing on the internet at the time, and it cost a fortune to get it shipped to me. I had it shipped, they wouldn't ship it to me, I had it shipped to someone in the United States, and then they sent it out to me, and it cost like 4 times the amount of the book was, but they didn't charge me. I would have paid it in some ways because I had so much enjoyment of it. This is Lyrics and Landscapes, etc. by Guy Roslin, 1878, Arthur H. Moxon. And it's just wonderful poetry. I really, really enjoy it. I'm glad. I've been looking for a few of these things because they've been hidden behind there. So I'm gonna enjoy reacquainting myself with them because as of Thursday I'm furloughed until the end of the month. So I want some good poetry to look at. And then here's Throughout the Year, Poems Old and New by Guy Roslin, W.B. Whittington Limited, 1886. And I think these are the only two books that the poet did. This is a bit rough. You can see around the edges, but I think it's just, the other one is really difficult to find. Collected Shorter Poems of W.H. Auden, 1927 to 1957. And it's a second printing, multiple printings from 1966, originally 34. Random House, New York. And I would say Auden is a bit of an acquired taste. I've got his prose, his essays, which I like much better. Lyra Evangelistica, A.S. Cripps. Very nondescript. Oh, I was upside down. That's the cover. It's 1909. Arthur Shirley Cripps. Shirley Cripps. It's Lyrica Evangelistica, Missionary Verses of Mashonaland. So that definitely grabbed me. It's 1909, second printing and second edition. It's some interesting stuff. Let's put it that way. John Drinkwater, Selected Poems, 1922. Frontispiece drawing. Oh. And it's got an interesting book plate on. Another heraldic armorial shield. Julian Hamilton Casson Simpson. And I'm going to have to look to see if this is the Simpson that could be the other ones that I have, but only have the name in for Swinburne and so forth, because the initials kind of match up. So I might now have a full name to look for. This one's Poems by Ralph Hodgson, Macmillan and Company, 1917. And I think this is sort of just a one-off, one book published by the author at the time. It has an interesting bookplate in it of Monica Norman. I really like it, and it's there's an EWER. I'm not sure what that means, but I like the bookplate. And poems by wait a minute. I got a duplicate. Poems by Ralph Hodgson. This one with a dust jacket. 1923. That's 1914. I wonder if they're the same poems. And sure I looked. Gypsy Girl. Yeah, it's the same book, but later edition. In Cap and Bells, Owen Seaman. I love the 1900 John Lane, London. I love the title page. It's just tipped in. Again, this is, I think there's a lot of the stuff is sort of early, like the teens, the first 25 years of the 20th century, a lot of it, 20th century, and a lot of it are just one-offs. Poems of Ernest Dowson. Just a lovely green buckram with the embossing on the front. It's just a lovely book. Interesting poetry as well. There's the poet there. A little introduction about him. It is John Lane, The Bodley Head. It's with a memoir by Arthur Symons, 4 illustrations by Audrey Beardsley, and a portrait by William Rothenstein. It's a 5th edition, doesn't give me a year, and there's a drawing of the author. This one's quite interesting. Village Verses, etc. by, there's another guy, Rosalind Run, Moxon and Company, 1876, Village Verses. I think it actually these might be collected in the other one. But there's 2 different book plates. There's Swinford Old Manor, Ex Libris, and initials AA. I did find that one time. It's quite cool. And then there's another one on the bottom, put sideways, by W.D. Vincent. And then, as far as I can tell, it's signed by the author, with the author's compliments. Many thanks. I'm pretty sure it is. It's hard to tell, but at least it purports to be. So keep that aside because I want to keep his stuff out to reread. Charles Murray. And it's signed by Charles Murray, Cape something, I can't read, 29th of the 4th. It must be 13 or 23. It's Hamworth with an introduction by Andrew Lang. 2 illustrations by Douglas Strachan. It's Constable and Company. And it's kind of interesting because, again, I'll need to look into this. Whether or not this is an original poem or just copied out. It's things like that that are kind of intriguing. Now, here's a poet that a lot of people I'm sure have heard of, but gone out of favor. Robert W. Service. And this is copyright Canada, 1907. 35th edition. Toronto, William Briggs, 1913. Songs of a Sourdough. If Amy is watching this one in Canada, I'm sure, has come across Robert Service, unless she hasn't had much exposure to poetry, which could very well be. But, yeah. His big one is Cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales, and so on and so forth. And it has an interesting sticker on the front. Please do not destroy this book, as others may want to read it. Return it to us and get another. WVS 32 Coates Gardens, Edinburgh. So it was a lending library or bookshop. There's another Rhymes of a Rolling Stone, which is a big one of his as well. It's London T. Fisher, Unwin, multiple printings. Edition, originally 13. This is 8th impression, January 1917. And we've got two more. An author I really, really like. Edna St. Vincent Millay, 2nd April, 1931. I don't think I'd be lucky enough to have it now. It's 2nd edition. But it's owned by that Monica Norman. Book plate again. And lovely poetry. And also, the last one is her collected poems, Edna St. Vincent Millay. There's a long inscription to William on the occasion of a very special birthday, May 25th, 1979, from Jean-Paul, with affection. It's edited by Norma Millay, Harper Row and Publishers. Copyright, it's the 1956 edition, originally 1949. I do want to get more up-to-date ones with more of her poetry, but she is a fantastic poet. Like a lot, as I say, I've read bits and pieces of everything that I got here. Some I don't remember at all. Some stand out, and she stands out definitely, and so does the this chap here, Guy Roslin. Fabulous stuff if you can find it. But yeah, so there we go. BookTube. We'll be back tomorrow with Shelf 12. Can you wait?